Here's the truth. Not everything you design is going to see the light of day. Some of my best ideas, the one I really poured myself into, they will never get built. And I know this already, and that's fine. These projects, they have shaped me and they have taken me through this journey, which now brings me in front of you. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if these projects had actually been built, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, making a YouTube video. And the reality is, every architect goes through this. Norman Foster had projects he never built. Zaha Hadid went through the first 10 years of her professional life without building anything, give or take. So it's important to keep in mind that these things happen. Projects get shelved, they get dropped, and you don't have to take it personally. It happened before, and I'm sure it will happen again. But that being said, it's still going to hurt. And today I'm going to take this opportunity to walk you through 5 of my best projects which will never be built. I will show you how I came to these designs through my environmental approach, and then I will share with you why these projects ultimately failed. And hopefully we'll learn something about these projects together. The last one is the most ambitious one. And feel free to comment below which is your favorite, or your least favorite for that matter. I can take it. Let's get started with number 1. This first project may seem mundane, ordinary, because at the end of the day, it's only 10 apartments. But to me and my office at the time, it was a big step forward. It was the first time I was working directly with a developer, and I really put a lot of effort into it. As we were developing this project, I remember I was reading Geoffrey Baker's brilliant book on Le Corbusier, where he discussed how Le Corbusier used curves to invite people into his buildings. And I thought that this was a fantastic occasion to actually apply this concept. And we started shaping the ground floor with this paradox between hard materials and curves. And then these materials also played a double role as being extremely opaque and heavy. And this sensation only got enhanced by the fact that they were next to permeable spaces. And we love this dichotomy because we were actually making something out of that ground floor. We were having our semi-public space, which was the courtyard, be part, in a way, of that public space, which was the pavement, because one walking through the pavement could actually look through into our courtyard. This also played in nicely with our environmental strategy of compartmenting. So all that semi-public space, including the staircase up to the front door of each apartment, was not heated, was just left to free run. And this was great because it created a thermal buffer space between the outside and inside. So when you would walk out of your apartment, you would encounter a thermal environment which was halfway through what you would encounter outside. And this already helps you adapt to what you're going to find. And the other thing we did for the ground floor, which was quite exciting for us, was we pushed the cars further in while still keeping the courtyard. This allowed us to give the bicycles a more predominant space. So these bicycles would be in direct visual relation with anyone who's walking in or out, so that they are pushed into choosing the bike over the cars. There's only so much an architect can do, and pushing people into the right decisions is actually the right way to go. And this also benefits the public realm, I believe, because it's nicer to walk through several bikes rather than just a parking lot. I think this destroys urbanism and is not what cities should be about. We actually advanced the design quite a bit. Initially, we had some units which were not really working properly in terms of daylight. I mean, I liked them, but they could have been better, especially when we started running the simulations. We noticed that we were not making the best use of daylight. And so in the end, we ended up redesigning the apartments and we fixed this issue. And we are actually ready to go. So I was actually quite proud of this one. Unfortunately, my client wanted to sell the project before building it. And we couldn't find a buyer who was actually willing to pay my client's price. So eventually, my project got scrapped. Too bad. But let's move on to the next one. This second project was a school extension which I worked on shortly after starting my own office. And the brief was simple enough. It was the addition of 20 classrooms. We started off with a site visit that immediately let us know what it was that we did not want to replicate with our building. The existing classrooms were all side lit, which is not really a problem, but the light distribution is just not ideal. And the corridors, as a consequence of this situation, were utterly uninviting. We saw that some strategies were trying to be implemented, but they just didn't work. This is why we didn't want to replicate the situation. Then, when we stepped out, we identified that the playground was quite uninviting. It was all mineral. What was even worse was the fact that the space where the children could be protected from rain, which unfortunately here is quite necessary, was not an ideal one. The height was just uninviting again. So our proposal was a semicircular building that would just hug the limit of that playground, actually enhancing the sensation one felt on that playground by providing protection from the predominant wind direction, which is southwest. Above and to one of the limits of our building, we placed a very high pergola, which was going to protect the corridor, which was going to be an external one. This way, the corridor could be left free running, and it could also double up as an extension of the covered spaces outdoors for those recurring rainy days here in Belgium. Inside the classrooms, instead of side lighting, which is commonplace in academic institutions, we tried having the light source come from where you actually look. I know that this is a bold attempt, and the main issue we were facing was glare. Our response to this situation was make the place where the blackboard was going to be bigger than the blackboard itself, so that your eye would transition through this buffer area, therefore avoiding this high contrast. We also had a window to the back, so to the corridor, because the corridor was external, so we could have borrowed light from here. And that proved very important because it brought light to the deepest side of the plan. This idea actually came from a childhood memory of mine, where I remember sitting in class, looking out the window and then looking back to the blackboard. And I was constantly moving my head one way to the other. And I always thought, what if the point I was looking was always in the same direction? Well, this was a competition, and sadly, we didn't win it. To be honest, I don't know who did, and I don't even know what they did. It just stings too much. This next one is probably the one that hurt the most. It was a daycare, and as a father, it stuck too close to home, I would say. At the time, I had 2 kids in daycare, so I thought I was in pole position to design this project. And I felt like I knew exactly how I wanted this space to feel. We designed the whole daycare around a circle, and that choice was not arbitrary. The site was utterly chaotic, no clear grid, no dominant lines. A circle allowed us to avoid having to choose one direction over another. It gave the building a certain neutrality, but at the same time made it feel like it really belonged there. But even more important than that, this circle started to be a sort of protective gesture, because the whole idea of the project was for it to work as an inverse panopticon, where from anywhere in the building one could see what was happening in this courtyard we were creating in the middle of the circle. The idea was that the children were going to be playing there, and any bystanders could quickly act if they see something happening. This was working as an inverse panopticon, where the outside was shielded and the inside could be seen from anywhere, thanks to the architecture itself. Inside, we sequenced our spaces on a thermal logic, so the spaces that required the highest temperatures were cluttered together, and we were moving gradually further out to cooler and cooler areas. So the play areas where the children are, usually only in their diapers because they're often changed, were significantly warmer than the places where they would sleep, because there they need a cooler temperature. Subsequently, this is how we place the rest of our spaces. Then for this project, we also carried a lesson from our previous one, and we created a space for those rainy days. which was the entrance atrium. I was extremely proud of this one. I felt we got everything right. Unfortunately, the judges didn't feel the same way. This time I did check who won the competition and what they proposed. I never bothered to check if they actually built it or not. Project 4 was yet another circular design, which starts to be a theme apparently. This one sat in a crossroads in the middle of a forest. It was a seasonal cafe and an Infopunt, only operating during the warmer months, because here in Belgium, the latitude is so high up that the sun sets fairly early during the cooler months. So we knew that heating wasn't going to be an issue because we didn't need to actually heat the space because it wasn't going to be occupied. We didn't mind having the cafe fully glazed because the idea was that these windows would be operable, and we had natural wind protection thanks to the foliage of the trees. So our focus was actually placed on trying not to disturb those trees. So our circle, which has a diameter of 40 meters, was placed where it wouldn't be in the way of the trees. Whenever a tree was found to be in the way of our building, we just designed our building around it. We accommodated the tree. The toilets for this building were actually left free run. And the Infopunt itself, well, it wasn't even enclosed. The other part of the building that we had was a storage area. So again, it was left to free run. It was really a beautiful environmental experience. And although the project didn't move on, I was, again, quite proud of how we responded to the place with our proposal. Now for the final project, which I said was the most ambitious one of them all. And you'll see why immediately. It's actually an observation tower in the middle of the same forest. And it was quite poetic, to be honest. Visitors would enter this journey through a sort of tunnel, then start progressing through the building in a staircase that would become more and more permeable as you would move up. And then you would have that big reveal to a forest canopy. After that reveal, you could continue the journey further down through another staircase that was again circling the whole tower. The metaphor was quite simple. Ascending through the structure, emerging to that light, and then coming back down to earth. At one point, we were actually asked to design a slide to go underneath the staircase, and we managed to fit it in. However, the project got scrapped before we could actually start doing the calculations of what speed you're actually going to attain when you slide down there. Later on, a new investor came on, and he actually wanted to have several of these towers throughout France, and each tower would be unique. They would be all different. And this was a request that I could accommodate because the whole tower was parametric. That same investor suggested having a museum on the base of the tower, which again allowed us to experiment even further with this idea of light, and we played with this concept. The museum would be dim and controlled, contrasting with this natural explosion of daylight at the top. It was really a project about control and surrender. At the bottom, we would have maximum control, and at the top, we were left to the elements. We loved it. The client loved it as well, but he didn't like too much what we thought it was going to cost. I'll be sharing more information about these projects and a few more that I had to leave out in my next newsletter, so be sure to subscribe. Links in the description below. Now, these 5 projects probably taught me even more than some that I actually built. They taught me that I really had to rush in order to meet some deadlines because competitions have deadlines which cannot move. But I think that most important of all, what it taught me was to stay away from circles. Oh. Thanks for watching.